Hello, everyone, and welcome to History of Fashion and Costume Design Weekly Lectures with Bridget. Today, we are looking at the Mongol Court Fashion and Dress in the Yuan Dynasty from 1271 to 1378. All right, so the source I used for today's lecture is Iran Shay's Mongol Court Dress, Identity, Formation, and Global Exchange, the first edition. And this book examines the Mongol Empire from 1206 to 1378 and how Mongol court dress is an expression of political power. Shea investigates the ways in which dress conveyed the political and cultural capital of Mongol women and puts forth the hypothesis that quotidian women's dress in the Yuan dynasty resembled men's dress, reflecting the status of women in Mongol society. And that was on page 72. So an overview of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire was from 1206 to 1368, was founded by Genghis Khan, first great Khan or universal ruler of the Mongol people. Genghis forced the empire by uniting nomadic tribes of the Asian steppe and creating a devastatingly effective army with fast, light, and highly coordinated cavalry. Eventually, the empire dominated Asia from the Black Sea to the Korean peninsula. Except expert horsemen and archers, the Mongols proved unstoppable in Central Asia and beyond, defeating armies in Iran, Russia, Eastern Europe, China, and many other places. The descendants of Genghis each ruled a part of the empire, the four khanates, most powerful of which was the Mongol Yuan Dynasty in China, which was 1271 to 1368. And the information I gathered here was from World History Encyclopedia. I linked a source there since I used a lot of that from quotes. But over here, right where my mouse is, it just shows the four khanates of the Mongol Empire, and we're looking here at the Yuan Dynasty that's in Eastern Asia. Perfect. So textiles, materials, and colors. So animal-based raw materials, including leather, felt, and fur, were commonly used. Sheep and goats provided fleeces and wool, especially cashmere was the primary material to make felt. Goats usually provided leather. Felt was then used not only for clothing and blankets, but additionally used for yurt tents, which are still used today by Asian nomads. With hunting and trade, furs such as rabbit, fox, and wolf were acquired, and difficult to obtain furs such as snow leopard and or lynx were reserved for the elite. Following the establishment of the Yuan dynasty, the Mongols began to wear finer materials, including silk and plant-based textiles. And red, as we'll see with a lot of these primary sources, was a popular color and pigment used in clothing, which was seen as a marker of happiness and like good fortune. And over here on the right, I have the Mongol scroll from 1293 CE, and it just shows like their costuming. So outer clothing, men and women, a short, loose-fitting robe, also known as a deal, was commonly worn. Outer lining of the deal usually was cotton or silk, and heavier versions for colder weather would incorporate felt, quilt, or fur padding. It was folded over and closed on the left side of the chest, accustomed with a tie or button underneath the right armpit, and depending on social status, some robes would have fur trimming on the neckline for the elite. And over here pictured, I have Mongol warriors in deal robes. The artist is unknown, from the 14th century. So here are headdresses and hats. So a bakta or a gugu is a tall headdress worn by noble women in the 13th and 14th century. So on the right, we have a fresco of a Mongolian noblewoman wearing a bakta or a gugu hat in the 13th century, and Empress Chabi wearing a bakta or a gugu hat in the 13th century. These were made from felt and occasionally fur, and it would include these flaps to cover the ears and a chin strap. And this is a quote I pulled from World History Encyclopedia. Elite men and women distinguished themselves by putting peacock feathers in their hats, women would add pearls, distinguishing themselves from men. So on the right, you see Chapi, and she has the pearls with her bakta. And this headdress was worn alongside a voluminous robe. So it wouldn't just be worn on its own with a casual look, it would be worn with a voluminous robe. Here we have warrior attire. The Mongols used fairly light armor, usually including a quilted robe or a leather jacket. Traditional robes reinforced with strips of hardened leather, bone, or metal. Chainmail and plate armor was very rare, and the head was protected by an iron helmet decorated with felt to cover the ears and neck. And I have one pictured here from the 13th and 14th century. And then we also have this parchment manuscript depicting Mongolian warriors on horseback from the 13th century. And I have this close up here that depicts the same helmet used. So men's clothing and robes. During this period, the Mongols were also strongly influenced by the lifestyle and customs of the Hans, including in their adoption of Feng Han and dragon pattern. These are motifs that were of the Han origins, and Han Dynasty is 206 BC to 202 AD. An important and popular robe for male Mongols was the terlik, which had decorations at the waist, tight sleeves, and pleats at the lower hem, making it convenient for horse riding, and it was worn by all social classes. Another distinctive form of male Mongol Yuan court robe is a robe with underarm openings, which is referred to as the all-weather robe or haiqing in post-Yuan Dynasty texts. And we have two depictions here on the screen. This robe has long sleeves and underarm openings, is on the seam, which joins the sleeves to the body of the robe. So on the top, right where my mouse is, it's a male attendant wearing a Mongol robe with underarm openings, the Qing. His left arm passes through the underarm's openings, making the left side sleeveless. And you can see that this might be easy for combat on horseback. And then a man wearing a red Mongol robe with underarm openings. The green underrobe is visible through the red haiqing. And this is from 1280 from the Khan hunting scene. Elite Mongol woman. In contrast to Song Chinese women, Mongol women were adept equestrians and did not bind their feet and participated in many of the same tasks as men, including warfare. Mongol women, relatively autonomous and independent, took care of practical aspects of daily life and participated in politics, such as deciding the next Khan. The Tang Dynasty, lasting from 618 to 907, has garments connecting steppe and Central Asian traditions. And this image I pulled here is a portrait of Yuan Dynasty empresses from the 13th century, and each of them are wearing the bakta or the gugu decorated with pearls and embroidery. And next slide is women in dress in East Asia. Central Asian women during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, continue to be depicted wearing Han-style dress. This is from page 74. Sometimes Tang women are painted wearing Central Asian men's dress, in other words, a type of riding coat with trousers. And Tang Song style women's dress, which took the form of Northern Song dress during the Liao, can be found in many images of tombs worn by serving women or musicians. And I pulled this image here called the tea serving scene from the Liao Dynasty, 1117 CE in Zheng Shigu's tomb, and I'll go more into depth on that with this slide. So the image on the right are three women depicted serving tea, and the material of the clothing drapes in soft folds, as it is likely meant to represent silk. And pulled from page 74 to 75, Tang Song woman's dress included an outer long sleeve jacket with ample sleeves that ranged in length from cropped to waist length. This jacket was fastened with a sash that tied in a bow just below the breasts, giving the effect of an empire waist. Under the jacket, women wore a dress that reached the floor with a sort of apron or secondary and slightly shorter skirt on top. Women who are depicted wearing this style clothing have their hair done in chiton style with 3 shingons, 2 on each side of the head and 1 on top. And we have the ruchun and the banbi, and this is specifically for women. So the casual clothing for men mainly followed the dress code of the Han people, and they wore banbi as casual clothing item, while ordinary women clothing consisted of banbi and ruchun. Rukun is a set of attire consisting of a short jacket, typically called ru, worn under a long Chinese skirt called kun. Worn by both men and women, yet usually always worn by women. The banbi, also known as the dahu in the Yuan Dynasty, is a waistcoat or outerwear with short sleeves worn either over or under rukun. And we have banbi women, banbi worn by 2 women in the 13th century depicted here. And then I also have these Yuan Dynasty female figurines wearing the rukun and banbi china, and from 1280 to 1368, between sometime in the Yuan Dynasty, and their stoneware. And then down at the bottom, we have the modern representation of traditional ruchun. All right. And banbi, also known as dahu and bija for men. So banbi, also known as dahu in the Yuan Dynasty, is a waistcoat or outerwear with short sleeves worn either over or under rukun, short-sleeved outer robes. The Mongol men also wore a sleeveless and collarless garment like a vest called the bija, whose making was attributed to Empress Chabi. The bija was convenient for mounted combat and shooting arrows. This was made of a one piece of fabric with the back region twice as long as the front region. It was collarless and sleeveless, and there were 2 loop straps which attached to it. So it's like a modern day vest. The bija was first worn by the Yuan Dynasty emperor, but it lately became popular among commoners. And I have this actual example from the Ming Dynasty, which was a little bit later, but it's a woman who's wearing a bija. And going into Empress Chabi, so Empress Chabi, she's depicted down here, and it's from 1280. It's on a hanging scroll, ink color on silk, and male-style dress worn by elite women in the Yuan Dynasty was very popular. In this artwork, Chabi wears a white long-sleeved robe that closes to the right in the same direction as the Khan's robe. Robe has underarm slits, revealing something made of green material under her white robe. Her robe is decorated on the chest and the shoulders with the design of a cloud collar and the representation of metallic thread. Her hair is braided in loops that fall behind her ears, and her hat fits snugly on her head and is secured under her chin with a strap. While this robe has differences in length and lack of a belt from the dress of men in the painting, can't really see the close-ups, but they're in there. It is nonetheless much more similar to male dress than to ample court robes that form the bulk of the surviving evidence of Mongol women's dress. And those were page 87 to 88. And to briefly summarize the Mongol style clothing, since this was a very, very introductory summarization of this huge dynasty. The Mongol dynasty was much larger than the Roman dynasty, so I could only cover very little bits, but just a quick summarization of the research I could find. Women traditionally wore longer sleeves and skirts than men. The deal, which is a loose-fitting short robe worn by both men and women, is protection from weather elements, allowing for ease of movement on horseback. Poorer individuals would have deals made of cotton or wool, as wealthier individuals had silk deals. The banbi, which is a waistcoat or outerwear with short sleeves. The rachun is a set of attire consisting of a short jacket, typically called ru, worn under a long Chinese skirt called chun. The haixing, which is a male all-weather robe with underarm openings, and the bakta and gugu is a tall headdress worn by noble women in the 13th and 14th century. And I pulled in This painting from Street Scenes in Times of Peace from the Yuan Dynasty, 14th century. It's just titled A Community in the Yuan Dynasty, and there's hats and clothings of these figures that appear to be in the Mongol style. And here is my work cited. Like I mentioned earlier, this was really barely scraping the surface at a really complex history and culture. The Mongol Empire was very, very big. And I was just briefly touching it, scraping off the surface of fashion and dress during the Yuan Dynasty. And I highly recommend all of these sources here. Very, very wonderful readings, and I found a lot of information from it, but it was really hard to concise it into this lecture that's under 20 minutes for you all. Thank you again for joining me. I'm signing off. I will see you all later. Have a good night.